on, everybody? This is Sean of Raw Select Music, and today I wanted to get back to talking about music. I feel like the last couple of videos I've done a little bit talking about what life in Japan is like, and even giving you a little glimpse of what life in Japan is like. But recently, I picked up two records that really caught my ear, and that'd be this one here. Birds by a producer named Boise, and this record, Balloons, by a producer named Wildflower. And I really like both these records, and they have a connection from the fact that they're on the same label. One of my favorite record labels, if not currently my favorite record label, and that's Street Corner Music. They are right now the best label for instrumental hip-hop that you can find, bar none. And sort of similarly to a video that I did a little while ago that I'll put a link to in the description down below, where I talked about Heist Recordings, a deep house record label that I really like. I wanted to do something a little similar to that, but instead of just talking about the label in general, I also wanted to break down the records that I have so far. And as you can see, I've got a halfway decent stack, so there's a bit of music to be talking about here. And I think they're all worth highlighting, and I think Street Corner Music is a label that needs a little bit more love. So this is sort of my love letter video to a record label that I think should be on more people's minds. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So a little bit of background about Street Corner Music if you're unfamiliar with the label. It's a sort of a vanity project label for this guy right here. This is House Shoes, and he is the creator of the record label Street Corner Music. It's sort of a vanity project for him to put out music of artists that he believes in that maybe other labels really wouldn't be paying attention to. And pretty much every artist that has been on Street Corner Music has gone on to gain more visibility and more notoriety over time. So I don't want to spend too much on the introduction because I actually do want to focus more on the records themselves. So with that sort of brief introduction out of the way, I will actually post a link to an interview that House Shoes did with Forbes magazine if you want to find out more about the man. He's going to tell you more about what he envisions for the label better than I could, so I'll let the man speak for himself. And I will instead focus on talking about this stack of records right here. So let's get into the music. To kick things off, I figured I'd start with the record that I picked up most recently, and that'd be the Boise Birds album. Now, I really like what I've heard from this album so far, but I haven't really listened to it enough yet to have a completely fully formed opinion about it. But what I will say is it does have some surprises. There's some creative sampling on here. There's a good variety of sounds and moods and textures, some great drums, and definitely some of those oh shit kind of moments that I usually look for when I listen to instrumental hip-hop. I might come back to this one at a later date and do a full review of it, but as it stands right now, I need to listen to this guy a little bit more before I can give a full, honest opinion about it. But what I've heard, I really dig. So working backwards from the Boise record, I wanted to talk about my second most recent Street Corner Music purchase, which is this Wildflower Balloons album, which is currently, and coincidentally, my second favorite Street Corner Records release at the moment, right next to this guy right here, which is Chains, which is easily my favorite record on the label right now. Now, I kind of slapped these two records together in this one little segment because out of all the releases on Street Corner Music, these are the two most ambient and moody of all of the releases so far. I'd go as far as to say that the Balloons one is the most album sounding out of all the records. Most of the releases on Street Corner Music feel like beat tapes, albeit really, really good beat tapes with some of the best hip-hop instrumentals that you're gonna hear. But this one really feels like an album to me. It really feels like all the songs fit together really nicely, and the mood and ambience is consistent throughout the entire record. Wildflower on Twitter describes him as a fan of hip-hop and ambient pop. And I'd say that's a pretty accurate description for the kind of stuff that you're going to hear on here. There's little twinges of jazz in the mix as well, as well as some electronic music influences that I hear. There's little bits of almost sort of sounds of like Boards of Canada on this record. And it even features some Boards of Canada-esque unique drums, for lack of a better description. I would say overall, right now, this is probably the most album-like of all of Street Corner Music's releases, and easily the first record that I would point to someone who's never heard of this label. Definitely worth checking out. And this is probably a record that I'm going to come back to and do a full review on in the future. Now, as far as the Chains record goes, this is also a fairly ambient and a fairly moody record. But I would say what separates it from Wildflower, which the Wildflower record is a fairly down-tempo, very moody record, and this has moments of this. This also has some really, really hard-hitting, aggressive moments as well. There's a lot of variety on this record, and I think that's why it's my personal favorite at the moment. Again, this might be a record that I come back to and do a full, in-depth look on, but I personally, right now, this is the one that every time I go back to it, I'll hear something new and find something that I really enjoy about it. And it just, between its atmospheric ambient moments and its hard-hitting moments, there's a lot to love about this record. And given its length, considering most Street Corner Music releases are kind of short, this is the one that feels the most complete to me. I really dig this record, and along with the Wildflower, I would definitely come to these two and say these are the two that you should check out immediately. So moving away from the moodier, more contemplative records in the Street Corner Music catalog, I wanted to get into one that, well, it does have some elements of subtlety. Its overall impact, there's not really much subtlety to it, and that has to be Siege Monstrosity. So I've heard in interviews or in different videos with House Shoes, sometimes referring to these sort of instrumentals as slaps. This album is nothing but slaps. Some of the hardest drums, some of the most driving samples. If you want sort of the hip-hop equivalent to heavy metal without getting into nu metal, this is it. This is some of the most aggressive music that's come out on Street Corner Music, and is easily, while it's not the most in-depth or the deepest record in the Street Corner Music catalog, sometimes I don't want that. Sometimes I just want some music that is the equivalent of going up to someone and slapping them across the face. And Siege Monstrosity does that perfectly. I don't know what else to say other than that. Of all the beat makers and producers on Street Corner Music, Illingsworth has to be the most eccentric and unusual of all of them. A lot of the beats on here sound really weird or do sort of unusual things. Now, I really wish I could go a little bit more in depth than just saying it's kind of a weird record, but unfortunately, as of the moment that I'm speaking and recording this video, nothing about it's really popping out other than those adjectives that I just used to describe it. I like it fair enough, but I definitely feel like I need to listen to this record a little bit more before I can give it a really strong opinion. It's worth checking out for sure. At least I know that it sticks out in my mind enough for me to say that. But as far as me having a strong opinion, like I do on a lot of the other records I've talked about in this video, I'm still not quite there with this one. Maybe it's worth coming back to in a later video. But for now, I'll just say, yeah, it's good. It's worth checking out. Out of all the releases so far on Street Corner Music, I have to say that the Stro Elliott compilation was easily my most anticipated, and I was definitely happy when I finally got this. So, Stro Elliott, if you're unfamiliar with him, and you should be familiar with him now because he's now an official member of the Roots, has made a name for himself for taking very well-known samples, and flipping them in a way that most people wouldn't think of. And on top of that, the fact that he programs all of his drums by hand rather than just simply sequencing them really gives his drums a real live feel to them that's pretty much second to none at this point, which is probably the reason why he's now a member of the Roots. This is a record that I will probably come back to again in full at a later date, but if you've heard his stuff on SoundCloud, and you should be checking him out on SoundCloud. That is criminal if you're not doing that. If you've heard his stuff on SoundCloud and you want to get it on vinyl, this is definitely a great record to pick up. And it's also a fun listen to because of the variety of music on here. There's some moody stuff, there's some hard-hitting stuff, there's even some just sort of humorous stuff. His versatility as a producer is definitely his strongest asset. That and the drums. You can't talk about Stro Elliott without talking about his drums. But yeah, another favorite on the Street Corner Music label. So the next two records that I'm going to talk about are loosely tied together by one particular concept. So you might call them the concept albums of the Street Corner Music catalog. The first one is the more recent Attention Kmart Choppers by Juicy the Emissary. And it's all tied together. The samples on here are all done from old Kmart radio in-store music tapes. So the music vibe on here has this cheesy, almost elevator music-esque tone to it. But make no mistake, Juicy the Emissary does some fantastic creative sampling on here, specifically on the second side where he samples Big Girls Don't Cry and turns it into one of the best slap tracks on this entire thing. Just thinking about this record makes me smile. And if you're looking for a more playful record, other than the Illingsworth tape that I was talking about, I highly recommend checking this one out because the Illingsworth record's a bit eccentric. This one's a little bit more straightforward. And I just like the general vibe of this. It's not moody at all, and it's just generally a fun record to listen to. The only thing I'd say is that maybe it's a little bit short. But yeah, definitely do not sleep on this one. Then the other of the two concept records that I was talking about was the 14KT 14 kilotape Redux. And much like the Attention Kmart Choppers, this uses sort of vintage sounding horror themes. I don't know, and it doesn't really seem like they're coming from movies necessarily, but it's basically set up like a horror soundtrack. So some of it's cheesy, some of it's sort of eerie, but the one thing that I will say about this record is it has some of the best drums on street corner music, period. Now let me reiterate that. best drums on street corner music. 14KT is a producer who should be on everybody's mind right now. I think he has, outside of maybe Stro Elliott, the best drums in hip-hop. And this album, despite how old it is, has some of the crispest, some of the cleanest, some of the nastiest, livest. Some of the drums on here just feel like a drummer just drunk on Jägermeister trying to destroy his drum kit. And that would be the Holy Moly track on side A. This is, as far as, I'd probably put this in my top 5 of street corner music records. And if you're looking for something that's more hard-hitting, along with the Search Monstrosity, definitely pick this one up. Then the last record of the street corner music releases that I have so far is Raj Mahal, The Gift Volume 8, which The Gift was a series that House Shoes started the label off on. It's a 10-volume series, and this is the only one that I have from the Gift series. And the one thing that I'll say about this record is, much like a lot of releases on street corner music, it's a pretty varied record with a lot of different sounds and textures. This one seems a little bit more blues and jazz focused, but still doesn't feel like, a throwback record that just sounds like 80s, not 80s, but 90s boom bap kind of shit. This, it also has a pretty wide variety of moods. Some songs slap, some songs are a little bit more contemplative, and some tracks do a little bit of both. But the one thing I will say on this has some of the most creative drum sampling on here, and he uses drum sounds that I think most people really wouldn't consider using for making a hip-hop instrumental. And I think that's one thing that I really, really like about Raj Mahal's production on this record. So this ends up being just another record from Street Corner Music. Well, I mean, the sticker from the Wildflower said it all. It's another Street Corner Shore Shot. So if you don't know about this record, check this one out. So that's going to be it from me today. Hopefully you got something out of this, and hopefully if you didn't know about Street Corner Music before, you've I've sparked an interest in the label now. I definitely want to know if anybody who did end up watching this video, if you are a fan of Street Corner Music, what's your favorite release from the label so far? I know there's still a ton of records that I haven't touched from them, and I want to find out if there's one record that I'm missing out on, what it is, so I can check it out for myself. But ultimately, I just want to create more of a conversation with whoever ends up actually watching these videos down in the comments. Hit me up there. Hit me up on my WordPress as well, because that's where I put all the links to all of the records that I talk about. The link will always be in the description. Go check me out over there. Check me out on Twitter. I post stuff on Instagram every now and then. That's going to be it for me. Let me know if you like this format of me just talking about a bunch of records in brief rather than trying to talk about one record in depth. I'm still playing around with some different concepts for this channel, and ultimately I want to hear more from you guys who actually do end up watching these videos. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.